We're diving into something pretty fascinating today. You mentioned that article about the Schumann resonance acting strangely.
Yeah.
Well, it claims that it's jumping to like unprecedented levels. It's kind of a weird thought. Like, have you ever thought about the Earth having a heartbeat? It's
Mm,
kind of what the Schumann resonance is, this electromagnetic hum that's always there.
that's a great way to put it, actually. It really is all about those electromagnetic waves. They just bounce between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere.
Okay.
You can think of it kind of like plucking a guitar string.
Yeah,
That vibration that makes the sound wave, right?
right.
Well, the Schumann resonance is similar, but instead of sound, it's these electromagnetic waves, and they're resonating at a specific frequency.
So, like the Earth constantly humming this electromagnetic tune, and the article is saying that tune is changing.
Exactly. So for decades, the main frequency was pretty steady, around 7.83 hertz.
Hmm.
Some people even think it's linked to our own brain waves, which is kind of wild.
Whoa.
But this article claims things started changing around 2014.
Okay.
There were reports of the Schumann resonance spiking, like to frequencies of 15 to 25 hertz even.
Hmm. That already seems like a big jump.
Oh, yeah.
But, that article you sent is from 2017, and it says those spikes got even higher,
Uh-huh.
like over 30 hertz. And the 2014 one doesn't mention anything that high. So does this article say why they might be happening?
Well, it kind of goes into some pretty speculative territory.
Okay.
It suggests a few possibilities. One is that the Earth's magnetic field is weakening.
Right.
You see, the magnetic field and the Schumann resonance, they're closely linked.
Mm-hmm.
So any changes in one could affect the other.
So it's like the Earth's magnetic field is the conductor of this electromagnetic orchestra.
Yeah,
And the Schumann resonance is like the music.
exactly. Good analogy. Now, imagine the conductor's getting a little wonky.
Uh-oh.
That could change the tempo, the volume, even the entire feel of the music.
Oh, wow.
That's what this article is suggesting is happening.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. But like, if the Earth's music is changing, what does that mean for us, the listeners?
Well, that's where things get interesting.
Okay.
The article links these Schumann resonance spikes to a shift in global consciousness. It even mentions people feeling like time is speeding up.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that.
Right,
So hold on, global consciousness, like what does that even mean?
right,
And how could it be connected to the Schumann resonance?
right. So think of it this way. What if human consciousness isn't just in our brains?
Okay.
What if it extends outward and creates this, like, collective energy field?
Okay.
And then what if that energy field can interact with the Earth's electromagnetic field,
Hmm.
influencing things like the Schumann resonance?
Okay, I'm trying to keep an open mind here, but that sounds pretty far out.
Yeah.
Is there any evidence for this global consciousness?
Well, there's this group, the Global Consciousness Project. They've been studying this for years. They believe that major events, like natural disasters or terrorist attacks,
Hmm.
they create measurable fluctuations in this network of random number generators. They're spread all around the world.
Wow.
They think that heightened emotions, whether good or bad, can actually have a measurable effect.
So they're saying our thoughts and feelings can influence, like, physical reality?
Yeah.
That's a pretty radical idea. But how does that tie back into the Schumann resonance?
Okay, so the article suggests that if human consciousness can influence the Earth's magnetic field,
Okay.
it could also be affecting the Schumann resonance.
Okay.
Like our collective vibe is changing,
Yeah.
and the Earth's electromagnetic field is responding.
Hmm. That's a lot to digest. I mean, we can't just hear the Schumann resonance, right? So how would we even know if it was affecting us?
Right, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's actually something we'll dig into in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
But before we do, there's one more thing in this article I want to touch on.
Oh, this is where it gets really juicy, huh?
Well, juicy might not be the right word. Maybe more like mind-bending.
Okay.
So it mentions this theory about the Earth's magnetic field, right?
Yeah.
It says it has this specific purpose
Oh.
to block our memories of past lives.
Wait, what? Our memories are being blocked by the magnetic field, and this is like from a scientific article?
Now, hold on. This part is definitely getting more speculative.
Okay.
It quotes like an Indian sage, but it doesn't actually give a name.
Hmm.
But he claims that ancient beings put this like magnetic memory block in place
Whoa.
so that our souls could experience free will
Hmm.
without being burdened by past experiences.
So like a cosmic clean slate.
Exactly.
Okay. Part of me find this like really exciting,
Yeah.
but also part of me is like, are we just grasping at straws here to
Yeah.
explain what might just be normal fluctuations, right? I mean, how do we even know if this sage is legit if our memories are blocked?
Right.
If we don't have those memories, how can we verify any of this?
That's a really good point. It's really important to be skeptical about these kinds of claims.
Yeah,
Remember, this article is just one interpretation
right.
of what these changes in the Schumann resonance might mean.
Mm,
There could be other explanations, ones we haven't even thought of yet.
true. Well, this is certainly a lot to think about.
Yeah.
But before we get, like, too lost in the cosmic stuff, I kind of want to bring it back down to Earth for a sec.
Okay.
How could these changes in the Schumann resonance, if they are happening, affect our, like, everyday lives?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
So we've talked about this like global consciousness shift and some theories about why it might be happening, but what about the practical stuff? Like if the Schumann resonance is actually changing and our brains are kind of swimming in this new frequency, how could that affect us like day to day?
That's where we need to be careful about separating the fascinating from the factual.
Right.
This article throws around terms like awakened calm and suggests, we might experience greater clarity, focus, maybe even bursts of creativity.
Hmm.
It links this to those higher frequencies we were talking about, claiming that they actually match brainwave patterns associated with those states.
So it's like the Earth's electromagnetic field is giving our brains a tune-up.
Yeah,
I do like the idea of a creativity boost,
yep.
but is there any evidence for this, or are we back in speculation land?
Well, there is this technique called neurofeedback,
Okay.
which tries to do this intentional.
Mm-hmm.
That basically monitors your brain waves, and then it gives you feedback, usually through sounds or visuals,
Mm.
to help you train your brain to achieve specific states, like focus or relaxation.
So if neurofeedback can change our brainwaves, with external feedback, could the Schumann resonance be doing that naturally,
Yeah.
without us even realizing?
That's the implication, but it's a pretty big leap.
Yeah,
The article kind of glosses over the fact that neurofeedback is, it's a very controlled process.
right.
It often requires multiple sessions and, specific training.
Yeah.
So saying that the Schumann resonance can have those same effects is, well, it's optimistic, to say the least.
Okay, a grain of salt is needed there. But even if it's not giving us like instant Zen focus, are there any other potential effects we should be aware of, good or bad?
The article does mention some possible downsides, while we're adjusting to these changes.
Okay.
Things like fatigue, dizziness,
Hmm.
even increased anxiety for some people.
Hmm.
Basically, our bodies might freak out a bit while we adapt to this new electromagnetic environment.
Yeah, like upgrading your phone's operating system. Sometimes it runs better, but
Right?
sometimes it just like glitches out until it figures things out.
Exactly.
It's that global upgrade idea again.
Exactly. And just like with a phone update, some people will adapt quickly, while others, might take a little longer.
Right.
Patience is key with ourselves and with each other.
Okay, that makes sense. But I keep thinking about that whole time speeding up thing.
Yeah.
It seems like everyone is saying that these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any like scientific basis for that feeling, or are we all just like losing it?
It's definitely a common feeling, but the link to the Schumann resonance,
Yeah.
it's pretty flimsy.
Yeah.
Our perception of time,
Yeah.
it's super complex,
Yeah.
It's influenced by all sorts of things, our age, our emotions, even how engaged we are in what we're doing at that moment.
So while the article suggests the Schumann resonance could be like messing with our internal clocks, there's not enough evidence to say for sure.
Right. It's a fun theory, but we need more than correlation to prove causation.
Okay.
It's like saying ice cream sales cause shark attacks, right? They both go up in the summer, but that doesn't mean one causes the other.
Yeah, good point. But it does make you wonder about the bigger picture.
Yeah.
If we are all like experiencing these subtle changes,
Yeah.
could it be a sign of something bigger? Like
Mhm.
the whole humanity waking up idea that the article talked about.
Hmm.
Like what would that even look like in reality?
Well, it's definitely a thought-provoking idea, right?
Yeah.
If this shift in consciousness is real,
Yeah.
it could have huge implications
Yeah.
for how we relate to ourselves, each other, and the planet.
Mm.
Imagine a world where empathy and compassion are just, the norm,
Right.
where we're more aware of how our actions impact, everyone and everything,
Okay.
where collaboration and compassion replace competition and conflict.
Okay, that does sound pretty utopian.
Yeah.
But part of me is still stuck on that if. If this shift is real, if consciousness is truly evolving like that, human history isn't exactly a shining example of peace and harmony, right?
Yeah, right. We've got a long way to go, but I think it's important to remember that change doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It's a process, a slow and messy one a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And it's not like we're starting from nothing, right? There are
Right.
tons of people and organizations out there working towards a more just equitable, sustainable world.
That's true.
Maybe this shift, if it is happening, could be the catalyst.
Hmm.
The thing that accelerates those efforts and gives humanity that little push that we need.
So instead of just waiting for some grand awakening to fix everything,
Yeah,
it's more about recognizing that we're active participants no matter how this unfolds.
precisely. We're not just along for the ride. We're co-creating it,
Yeah.
moment by moment, choice by choice.
Right.
And that's both empowering and incredibly sobering, don't you think?
It really is. Like, it makes those everyday choices, those little acts of kindness or moments of, frustration,
Yeah,
seem so much more significant.
yeah, yeah.
But, if we're all connected,
Mm-hmm.
if our, like, individual vibes contribute to this collective,
Yeah,
what happens when those vibes are negative?
right.
And we talked about, like, fear and anxiety being potential side effects.
Yeah.
But what if those negative emotions actually make the problem worse?
That's a great question, and one that I don't think the article really addresses.
Right.
I mean, if we accept that our collective consciousness can influence the Schumann resonance,
Yeah.
then it makes sense that negative emotions could disrupt things too, right?
Yeah.
It'd be like adding fuel to the fire.
Hmm.
If we're all like tuned to the same frequency of fear and anxiety,
Yeah.
could that create a feedback loop,
Right.
amplifying those emotions and maybe leading to like more chaos and instability?
Yeah, that's a pretty unsettling thought.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if, like, some of the negativity and division we're seeing in the world right now,
Uh-huh.
is it like a symptom of this bigger shift?
Yeah.
Like a collective freak out as we try to figure out what's going on.
That's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Definitely worth thinking about.
Yeah.
But it's also important to remember that we have the power to choose how we respond.
Right. Yeah.
We can either give in to that fear and division,
Yeah.
or we can choose to cultivate resilience, compassion, understanding.
Right.
And that brings us back to the Heart Math Institute and their work with heart coherence.
Oh, right. It's like they're offering a like roadmap for how to handle this shift.
Yeah.
Like some tools for choosing a more positive path.
Yeah.
It's like they're saying, hey, if our individual states of being are affecting everyone, let's make sure we're bringing our A game.
That's a great way to put it. They believe that, by learning to regulate our emotions and cultivate a sense of inner peace, we can actually help create a more harmonious world.
I really like that idea. But it kind of makes you wonder, right? Like, if we can intentionally cultivate positive emotions
Yeah.
and contribute to a more harmonious world,
Yeah.
what happens when the opposite is true?
Uh-huh.
Like, what happens when it's all fear, anger, negativity?
Yeah.
Is that what's behind these Schumann resonance spikes?
That's a question worth pondering, and it's something we'll explore a bit further in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We've talked about the potential positive effects of this shift,
All right.
but what about the potential negative consequences?
So we've talked about like the upsides and the downsides of this whole Schumann resonance thing, but I think it's time to tackle the big question, right?
Yeah.
The so what? Like, if this is really happening, if our collective consciousness is actually evolving alongside these electromagnetic changes, where does that leave humanity? Where are we headed?
That's the ultimate question, isn't it? And unfortunately, there's no easy answer, no crystal ball to tell us for sure. But I think we can approach it from a few angles. First, we got to acknowledge that the article presents a very specific narrative. It's framing this shift as like an awakening, a positive evolution.
Right.
But even the article admits that change can be messy, even if it does lead to something better.
Right. And we talked about those growing pains, fatigue, anxiety, feeling like time is slipping away. But what about the bigger picture? If we like zoom out, look at the potential long-term implications of this shift. Are we talking utopia, dystopia, or something in between?
Let's play with those possibilities for a minute. If we entertain the idea that our consciousness is becoming more interconnected, more expansive, it could like radically change how we relate to everything, ourselves, each other, the planet. Imagine a world where empathy isn't just a nice idea. It's like the default. A world where we just get how our actions impact the whole, where we're collaborating and being compassionate instead of competing and being in conflict.
Okay, that does sound pretty utopian, but I'm still stuck on the if. If the shift is real, if consciousness is evolving like that, I mean, human history isn't exactly a poster child for peace and harmony.
True, we have a long way to go. But I think it's important to remember that change doesn't just happen. It's a process, and often a pretty slow and messy one. It's not like we're starting from scratch either. There are so many people and organizations working towards a more just, equitable, sustainable world. Maybe this shift, if it is happening, is the catalyst, the thing that accelerates those efforts and gives humanity the push it needs to evolve, to move beyond these self-destructive patterns.
So it's not about passively waiting for some grand awakening to like fix everything. It's about recognizing that we're actively participating no matter what happens.
Exactly. We're not just passengers. We're co-creating this whole thing, moment by moment, choice by choice. And that's both incredibly empowering and incredibly sobering.
It really is. It makes those everyday choices, those little acts of kindness or, moments of frustration, they seem so much more significant now.
Yeah, yeah.
But okay, if we're all connected, if our individual vibes are contributing to the collective, what happens when those vibes are like negative? We talked about fear and anxiety being side effects, but what if those emotions are making things worse?
That's a crucial point, and one that I don't think the article really grapples with. If we buy into the idea that our collective consciousness can influence the Schumann resonance,
Yeah.
well, then it makes sense that negative emotions could have a disruptive effect too, right?
Hmm.
Like it's adding fuel to the fire. If we're all tuned into that same frequency of fear and anxiety,
Yeah.
it could create a feedback loop. Those emotions get amplified, maybe leading to even more chaos and instability.
That's that's a pretty dark thought. It makes you wonder if some of the negativity and division we're seeing, it's like a symptom of this shift, a collective freak out as we try to figure out what's going on.
That's an interesting way to look at it. It's definitely something to consider. But we also can't forget that we have the power to choose how we respond to all of this.
Right.
We can give in to the fear and division, or we can choose to cultivate resilience, compassion, understanding. And that brings us back to the Heart Math Institute and their work with heart coherence.
Right. They're basically offering tools for how to navigate this shift consciously, right?
Exactly. They believe that by learning to regulate our own emotions, cultivate a sense of inner peace, we can contribute to a more harmonious world.
I love that. It's a reminder that we're not just helpless bystanders. We can actually do something.
Absolutely. Every act of kindness, every moment of genuine connection, it can shift the energy. In a room, in a community, maybe even on a global scale.
That's a powerful thought. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway for our listeners? What do we want them to walk away with?
I think the most important message is this. We're living in extraordinary times. The world is changing, we're changing. It's okay to feel uncertain, to question everything, to be excited and terrified at the same time. Stay curious, stay open-minded, and most importantly, stay connected. To yourself, to others, to the natural world. We're all in this together, navigating uncharted territory. And the only way through is, well, together.
That's beautifully said. And if our listeners want to explore any of these topics further, we'll include some links in the show notes. Information about the Global Consciousness Project, the Heart Math Institute, and of course, the article that started it all.
Perfect. There's a wealth of information out there for those who want to dive deeper.
So to wrap up, I want to leave you with this final thought. The Schumann resonance, this electromagnetic heartbeat of our planet, might be more than just a scientific curiosity. It might be a mirror reflecting our own collective evolution, a reminder that we're all connected and that our choices matter more than we realize. As we go about our day, let's try to remember that we're not just living our lives, we're shaping the future, one thought, one feeling, one action at a time.
That's a beautiful sentiment to end on. Thanks for having me on this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep expanding your awareness.